He who survives decides on the remembrance of it, and he survives not just once. He survives for the first time when the others die. He survives a second time when he tells others the tale of death and destruction. The Jewish historian Flavius Josephus was one such survivor. In the conflict between the Jews and the Romans, he defended a fortress. When all seemed lost, the trapped defenders began to kill one another so as not to fall into the hands of the Romans. There were only 2 survivors, and one of them was Flavius Josephus. By the grace of Rome, he became a historian and wrote an account of the Jewish war. He came across a tale which, apart from the ending, was almost the same as his own, the story of Masada. Masada is a huge rock cliff overlooking the Dead Sea. It's topped by a flat plateau, which was turned into a fortress. Masada is like an enormous stone left high and dry when the waters of the Dead Sea evaporated long ago. According to Flavius Josephus, the fortress was built by King Herod of Judea.
Herod thus prepared this fortress on his own account, as a refuge against 2 kinds of danger. The one for fear of the multitude of the Jews, lest they should depose him and restore their former kings to the government. The other danger was greater and more terrible, which arose from Cleopatra, queen of Egypt, who did not conceal her intentions but spoke often to Antony, and desired him to cut off Herod, and entreated him to bestow the kingdom of Judea upon her. Moreover, he built a palace therein at the western ascent. It was within and beneath the walls of the citadel, but inclined to its north side.
Masada is the product of a persecution mania, paranoia set in stone, a cliff-top nest for timorous eagles, an impregnable fortress built on the periphery of a realm. Better to be a monarch without land, it would seem, than to rule with land but under threat. But what was left for the king at Masada? Dominion? Over what? Sand and stones? Places like Masada bear testimony to power. Behold, they say, I am invulnerable. But in reality, where power is concerned, they are useless. They are safe, but just as bunkers and tombs are safe. They are places of downfall. In such places, even the greatest ruler can only dream of that which we all dream of, sheer survival. And for someone in power, that dream is a nightmare.
Herod also built a wall round about the entire top of the hill. The king reserved the top of the hill, which was of a fat soil and better mould than any valley for agriculture, that such as committed themselves to this fortress for their preservation might not even there be quite destitute of food. He also had cut many and great pits as reservoirs for water out of the rocks at every one of the places that were inhabited, both above and round about the palace, and before the wall, and by this contrivance he endeavoured to have water for several uses.
A 100 years later, those bereft of all power gathered at Masada. In the year AD 66, the Jews rebelled against the occupying Roman forces. The Romans hit back. 4 years later, Jerusalem was razed to the ground. The fortress of Masada became a refuge for scattered groups of Jewish rebels. Eleazar was the leader of the Sicarii. Flavius Josephus, the historian, describes them as sectarians, fundamentalists, fanatical freedom fighters. But Flavius Josephus had made his peace with Rome. He wrote for both sides, for the Romans who had spared his life, and for the Jews, because he had to refute their claims that he was a traitor. In the winter of the year AD 72, the Romans advanced on Masada.
The Roman commander, Flavius Silva, built a wall quite round the entire fortress, that none of the besieged might easily escape. He also pitched his camp in such an agreeable place as he had chosen for the siege, and at which place the rock belonging to the fortress did make the nearest approach to the neighbouring mountain.
The Romans had time on their side. As professional soldiers, they knew that they would take Masada. War is work, and work creates a product. That product is conquest, if not tomorrow, then the day after, or the day after that. Did those trapped on the rock know that, or did it dawn on them slowly? A learning process with a fatal end.
The Roman commander Silva undertook the siege itself. To the top of the hill from the west there was a certain eminency of the rock, very broad and very prominent, but 300 cubits beneath the highest part of Masada. It was called the White Promontory. Silva had his soldiers occupy it. He ordered the army to bring earth. And when they fell to that work with alacrity, the bank was raised. At the same time, Silva ordered that great battering ram which he had made to be brought thither and to be set against the wall. With some difficulty, frequent batteries against it broke down a part of the wall and quite overthrew it. However, the Sicarii made haste and presently built another wall within that, which should not be liable to the same misfortune from the machines with the other. When Silva saw this, he thought it best to endeavour the taking of this wall by setting fire to it. So he gave order that the soldiers should throw a great number of burning torches upon it. Accordingly, as it was chiefly made of wood, it soon took fire. Now, at the very beginning of this fire, a north wind that then blew proved terrible to the Romans, for by bringing the flame downward, it drove it upon them, and they were almost in despair of success, as fearing their machines would be burnt. But after this, on a sudden, the wind changed into the south, as if it were done by divine providence, and blew strongly the contrary way, and carried the flame and drove it against the wall, which was now on fire through its entire thickness. So the Romans, having now assistance from God, returned to their camp with joy, and resolved to attack their enemies the very next day. When he saw their wall burned down by the fire, and could devise no other way of escaping, and setting before their eyes what the Romans would do to them, their children and their wives, if they got them into their power, Eleazar consulted about having them all slain. Since we long ago, my generous friends, resolved never to be servants to the Romans, nor to any other than to God himself, who alone is the true and just Lord of mankind, the time is now come that obliges us to make that resolution true in practice. Let our wives die before they are abused, and our children before they have tasted of slavery. And after we have slain them, let us bestow that glorious benefit upon one another mutually, and preserve ourselves in freedom as an excellent funeral monument for us.
But no one applauded Eleazar's words. How do you turn people in despair into collective murderers? It is not enough to say it is God's will, nor to invoke freedom in death. Eleazar painted a grim picture of what they could expect, torture and a bloodbath. But those who are expected to kill for political reasons want a reward. So Eleazar promised his followers that their souls would enjoy immortality in heaven, a perfect example of political agitation.
The laws of our country and of God himself have from ancient times, and as soon as ever we could use our reason, continually taught us that it is life that is a calamity to men and not death. For this last affords our souls their liberty and sends them by a removal into their own place of purity, where they are to be insensible of all sorts of misery.
Eleazar convinced his people. As for Flavius Josephus, the historian who describes everything in detail, he who, faced with a similar situation himself, had opted for a life in bondage instead of choosing the freedom to die. He vacillates between respect and bewilderment.
So they went their ways, as one still endeavouring to be before another, and as thinking that this eagerness would be a demonstration of their courage and good conduct, if they could avoid appearing in the last class. So great was the zeal they were in to slay their wives and children, and themselves also.
It was not human beings who survived at Masada, but a legend. Expressed in another way, because people died, a legend was born. In the 1920s, the heroic tale of Masada played a central role in the Zionist movement. Masada must never fall again was the slogan. The newly formed State of Israel had its military recruits take an oath of allegiance on the mountain. Once again, it was all about survival, precisely by denying Masada. Because Masada remains an ambiguous legend, one that knows freedom, but, as Flavius Josephus says, only as a shroud, not as a part of life, not for survival.